Iran launches missiles targeting U.S. base in Qatar. Okay, let's just get right to it. After the United States entered the war, right, by bombing Israel, there was an inevitability that Iran was going to retaliate, most likely back at Israel, but also the United States of America. This is legally within the rights of Iran to do. It was illegal for the United States of America. Did I say that? No. Iran bombed Israel, but Iran was slated to also turn around and bomb U.S. bases in the region after the United States violated Iranian sovereignty once again. Whole ass, completely separate nation for the record. We don't get to just bomb other countries. Not only do we just not get to bomb other countries. Oh, I said America bombed Israel. Sorry. When the U.S. bombed Iran, the 3 Iranian nuclear sites, that was done to provoke some kind of retaliation against the United States. There's 40,000 troops in the region. There's aircraft carriers in the region. There's numerous bases. Obviously, U.S. CENTCOM was being run out of Qatar. 10,000 troops positioned there. There's troops in Bahrain. There's troops in Syria, like 1,000, I think, or so. There are troops in Iraq. There's American troops all around, and there are plenty of opportunities. There's plenty of strike opportunities for Iran. But one of the things that I initially suspected and called out ahead of time was that given Iran's track record of restraint in this tit for tat, in this back and forth that was happening with Israel, and also in the limited response that took place when Donald Trump, in his last tenure, severely escalated and killed Qasem Soleimani, the famous Iranian head of the IRGC Quds force, like their special forces. When Donald Trump killed Qasem Soleimani in his first tenure, the Iranian retaliation was once again incredibly limited. And I think that the generals that were in Trump's ear this time around, on top of like the Israeli influence in this process, because it's pretty obvious that we are now letting Israel guide our foreign policy in the region. They're in the driver's seat and they are running the show, right? These escalations that are happening and no interest in negotiation whatsoever has always been Israel's most important policy. Iran is like the crown jewel that they want to take out in the region because it is a funder of all these resistance groups that resist against Israel. It goes against their ambition of doing this greater Israel project, which is an exterminationist project. It's unfolding in Gaza right now, and it's happened in southern Lebanon in the past. And of course, for this reason, Iran being a sovereign nation state and being able to create like logistical supply chains in the entire region was a major issue for Israel's ambitions of developing a larger state of Israel, that's their goal. So this obviously is against America's interest in the region as well, because Israel is an extension of American imperialism in the region, and Israel is a forward operating base for the United States of America, as I've said time and time again. It is an unsinkable aircraft carrier. It has its own espionage capabilities. It plays a very important role in all of our operations in the Middle East, a resource-rich region that we want to dominate and control. Obviously, considering the other Gulf nation states, Saudi Arabia and Qatar as well, and the UAE and every other Gulf region oil-rich nation state is completely in the pocket of the U.S. empire. Iran is the one that does not play ball. When America entered this conflict to strike at the nuclear facilities, which is a violation of numerous different international rules that were set in and of itself, because you can't just strike nuclear facilities just because you felt like it. In the midst of a denuclearization negotiation that was taking place, they did so because they were following through on Israel's ambition. Okay? This is Israel's goal. America's goal in the past was to try to use diplomacy against Iran. That was what Barack Obama did. And even in that diplomatic process, there were a lot of sanctions that they implemented on Iran in an effort to bully Iran into submission, to stop their nuclear ambitions dead in its tracks. But it was successful. It gives me no pleasure to report on this, considering that I'm not a big fan of Barack Obama. But Barack Obama's JCPOA agreement was actually a profoundly successful denuclearization agreement. Having said that, however, obviously Donald Trump, the first time when he became president, immediately, geared by the hundreds of millions of dollars that he had gotten from the Adelsons, at the time it was Sheldon Adelson, and his close relationship with Benjamin Netanyahu, very quickly turned around and cast aside that denuclearization agreement. Iran still followed the denuclearization agreement, regardless of the fact that Donald Trump had actually cast it aside. And then Donald Trump added additional sanctions to the state of Iran, at which point they started nuclear proliferation again. Because the real goal was never to stop the Islamic Republic from getting nukes. The real goal always has been regime change. The casus belli for regime change and the military action necessary to, in their minds, create either regime change or a failed state in Iran was by claiming that they had nukes, WMDs. A lot of Americans who are old enough remember the WMD memes from the Iraq War. They lied about Iraq having weapons of mass destruction, and they used that as a reason for why they had to go to war with Iraq. Now, of course, this came in the aftermath of 2 years of unlimited propaganda post 9/11. It was immediately after 9/11, so obviously people were a lot more invested into going to war, as opposed to doing this in 2025 in the ashes of the war on terror, where everybody understands that America lied to go to war with Iraq, and it was a major L for America in general, and it caused so much instability in the region and had tremendous impact, and it's deeply unpopular, so unpopular that Donald Trump literally ran against the Iraq war in 2016, against Hillary Clinton for supporting the Iraq war, and won. It's not working. The same meta is not really working unless you already have tremendous amounts of motivated reasoning to believe that Iran does have nukes and we have to blow them up. And there are some people who believe that, but clearly, judging by the latest YouGov poll that came out that I posted, 85% of the country does not want to go to war with Iran. 85% of the country. And the support for going to war with Iran is at like 5%. So what's spectacular about everything that has unfolded in this past week has been that, one, Israel is very clearly guiding the Middle Eastern policy at this point. They are in charge. They are holding the wheel, and we are doing everything for Israel, okay? That's number one. Number two, there is no appetite for this, and it's so crazy to me because they're not even trying to develop consent for it. They're basically saying, no, this is what it means. America first, baby. Iranians close to me say that the U.S. left the Obama agreement because Iran didn't let inspectors to all the facilities. No, that's not true. That's not true. Iran was completely in cooperation. How do you know that Iran complied with the JCPOA post-American withdrawal? Because Iran kept cooperating with international authorities, including the International Atomic Agency, the Atomic Energy Agency. So that's the reason why they knew that they were cooperating. The International Atomic Energy Agency is supposed to be this independent body. 70% of their resources goes to Iran. They only are there to monitor Iran, okay? Having said that, however, they might actually leave the NPT now, for the record. And it seems to me like the Iranian Parliament's National Security Commission has approved the bill on the suspension with the cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency. Because of course they're going to do that. Why wouldn't they do that? Why wouldn't they build nukes now? You cannot stop nuclear proliferation striking a country's nuclear bases that were designed to be deep underground specifically to avoid exactly what is happening right now. If you wanted to actually get Iran to play ball and not have nuclear proliferation, you had to basically do what Barack Obama did. That was the only successful method. They have scientists. Iran is an incredibly well-educated country. Contrary to what dumbass Americans think, Iran has a higher literacy rate than the United States of America. Iran is an incredibly educated country, a much more educated country than the United States of America. What are you supposed to do? Kill every single scientist in the country? Is that what you're going to do? I mean, if we're up to Israel, that is what they would do. I know that there's a lot of extra attention and extra eyeballs on this process right now because people are confused, and I wanted to give them like a quick refresher, quick background on this history. America and England destabilized Iran initially because Iran democratically elected a moderate social democrat who wanted to basically keep their own oil, to have sovereignty over their own oil. And England, instead of turning around and saying, all right, you know what, British Petroleum, we are going to play ball. This is your oil after all. We'll, design a 50-50 split for the revenue. Instead of saying 50-50 revenue split seems like a good idea, that's fair, fair is fair, right? They said, no, we're only going to give you 10% of the revenue still. How dare you do this? And then they implemented a coup. And then they installed the British puppet, the Shah. And the Shah was so unpopular, and the Iranians were so upset with this severe setback on their own sovereignty that they obviously retaliated. And there was a revolution that took place in Iran against the Shah, a revolution that was backed by the socialist forces, social democratic forces, popular mobilization, and of course, the Islamist forces as well. And the Ayatollahs came into power. People were understandably very upset, okay? They were understandably very upset at Western involvement and Western destabilization. That's important to understand why there's so much resentment towards Western destabilization in the country, even if they hate the Ayatollah, okay? There are plenty of secular Iranians that don't like the Ayatollah, that despise the repressive forces of the Islamic Republic on their own domestic affairs. But you know what they hate even more? When they get bombed by Israel, when they get bombed by America, when they are fearful that they're going to be pushed into war. Okay, no matter how many diaspora Iranians that say, I am Persian and I love the Shah, please put the Shah in charge. Iranians in Iran that's not like that popular of a sentiment. Does it exist in Iran as well? Of course that kind of sentiment exists in Iran as well. It's just nowhere near as overwhelmingly popular as it does here in the West. There are royalists in Iran as well. There were royalists initially in Iran as well. The CIA activated them and used them to put the Shah in charge initially. In any case, my point is that is the reason why America's actions and Israel's actions against Iran is most likely galvanizing and drawing up more support for the current repressive regime, okay? And their repression is negligible in this situation. Obviously, they see what's gone on in Gaza and they don't want that to happen to Tehran. Are you kidding me? Who the would want that? Felix talked about this on the last Chapo episode that I listened to with those history podcast guys. And I thought it was like a really easy summarization, easy to understand summarization, where it's like Israel will just like increasingly point to things that normal nation states have that they consider to be unacceptable, right? They'll be like, they have ballistic missiles, like we have to take them out. It's like, yeah, of course they have ballistic missiles. They're a sovereign nation. What sovereign nation is not supposed to have ballistic missiles? They have to have anti-air defenses. What do you mean? Israel will go, that's unfair. How come they have ballistic missiles? How come they have anti-aircraft defenses? That's unfair. They have nuclear power facilities. We can't let that happen. It's like, yeah, that's a country, man. Of course they have nuclear power facilities. They have every right to have a nuclear power grid. What are you talking about? And the more that Israel gets backed up by America, propped up by the United States of America, the more they demand. Gaza is obviously the final solution of this, the final equation of this, where they go, they have running water. That's unacceptable. They have food. That's unacceptable. How dare they have food? How dare they try to eat food? We must kill them all. That's the ultimate goal here. Every country in that region, unless they are directly servile to Western interests, to American interests, to Israel's interests, will get the Palestine treatment. It's just a matter of attrition. How quickly can they do this? Do they have the munitions to be able to do this? Do they have the capacity to be able to do this? And it's very clear that they're trying to do it all at once right now, because it feels like this is the last ditch effort of the ally or the extension of the dying empire, the United States of America. In this entire process, as I've said before, as I suspected, Iran has been incredibly restrained, constantly trying to do diplomacy with a bunch of belligerent actors that are not invested in diplomacy at all. Their goal, obviously, is to destabilize Iran. Their goal is to dismantle Iran. And they're going to do this by using ethnic tensions in the country. They're going to do this by using the Kurdish nationalist movements that are currently outside of Iran. I'm telling you right now, watch this space. They're going to say that the Iranian Kurds have finally had it, and they're going to try to use the Kurdish nationalist movement in Iran against the Iranian state. Just you wait. But that's for the future. What I predicted initially was that the Iranian government's retaliation, the IRGC's retaliation, was going to be incredibly restrained, even against the United States of America. After the United States bombed the nuclear facilities, Iran only retaliated against Israel the first night and last night as well. And then today, they finally struck against American assets in the region. Let's take a look.
This was a spokesman for the chief spokesman for the Israeli Defense Forces, Effi Defrin, General Effi Defrin. He was asked about Iran's attacks on U.S. bases, saying that we're following developments that are being reported. We are in touch with our partners in the region. And of course, Israel regards this as more proof of the violence, that Iran is a terrorist state that threatens not just Israel, but the region and the world. We're also hearing from Bahraini state state television that they have closed their airspace. The Interior Ministry in Bahrain, which of course is home to the US Fifth Fleet, had a...
Bro, they moved all the troops. They already said ahead of time that they were going to strike Qatar. It's a symbolic prize. The reason why the markets are up is because this was a de-escalatory retaliation. The markets are up because they were worried that the Strait of Hormuz was going to be mined. Iran has options in terms of retaliation here. The maximalist position would have been to continue bombing with long-range ballistic missiles Israel, using their short and medium-range and older munitions on American bases, shutting off the Strait of Hormuz, the 33-kilometer area that, 20% of all global oil and a ton of commerce goes through, okay? And then maybe even activate whatever remains of like the Hezbollah missile capabilities on Israel as well. That is the maximalist position. And Yemen, of course, as well, would be striking against American positions and also Israel with whatever capabilities they have. That is the maximum position. Or, well, I guess the one position above that is directly lighting oil refineries on fire. Okay. This would have, of course, nuke global trade in its entirety. So that was the maximum retaliation. Like any other part of that, any component that you remove from that is going to be obviously less severe. This right here, what they did was basically the most limited version where you save face. It's like a save face counterattack because you have to do something because you're a nation state. You're a proud nation state. You're a nation state that has an interest in like defending your own national sovereignty. You have to retaliate. The retaliation was largely symbolic. It's not a real deterrence at all, considering that Israel has refused to back down from the largely symbolic retaliations that Iran has engaged in so far. And America obviously is the top dog in the region. And I said that they were most likely going to eat it. They were going to tank the damage. They were going to say the facilities were not that damaged. There's not a state of disrepair. You only gave us a little bruise. It's fine. And we will continue to try and retaliate through legal options that we have with the hopes that they can get away. And America will actually come back to the bargaining table and negotiate and maybe even leave Iran alone. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that this is in America's plan. I think this is certainly not in Israel's plan. Israel's made that clear. So I do think that this is most likely a mistake, but we shall see. As I suspected, the generals who were in Trump's ear about how this at most would resemble the post-Soleimani assassination retaliation may have been correct, significantly limited, even if the target is a higher prize symbolically. 3 Iranian officials familiar with the plans said that Iran gave advance notice to Qatari officials that attacks were coming as a way to minimize casualties. The officials said Iran symbolically needed to strike back at the U.S., but at the same time carry it out in a way that allowed all sides an exit ramp. They described it as similar strategy to 2020 when Iran gave Iraq heads up before firing ballistic missiles at an American base in Iraq following the assassination of its top general. Iran also said, according to the Associated Press, that the missile barrage on Qatar was the same number of bombs used by the U.S. on its nuclear sites, signaling a likely desire to de-escalate. The problem here is this is not in Israel's plan. Israel very clearly does not want de-escalation. Israel very clearly does not want the Iranian state to exist. All you are doing at this stage is basically telling the powers in the region that they can do whatever the they want to you as they're doing it to you. Okay, they can do whatever they want to you, and you're never actually going to make them recalculate this decision. Israel has time and time again proven to every country that is paying attention in its neighborhood, in its backyard, that the only way that Israel stands down is if they are forced to stand down, if the cost is too much. Lebanon is the best example of this, of course. Israel invades Lebanon, Hezbollah pushes them back. Too many troops die. Too many Israeli occupying force, diaper force troops die. They have to recalculate. They have to inevitably pull out. Israel has never, ever backed away unless America told them to. Israel has never backed away from further military incursion and further land grabs unless they are forced to stand down.
Essentially issued an order advising people to stay at home. Now, no indications that anything has happened there, but it's just worth reiterating that the concerns about what just happened in Qatar are not just felt in that country, but I think throughout the Gulf region. But again, just to be very clear, we need to know whether any of these got through. A US official speaking to ABC News has essentially said that the Qataris and the Americans were involved in the shoot downs. They're also saying that they don't think any of those projectiles landed in Al Udeid Air Base. Interestingly, Press TV, which is the pro-Iranian or Iranian government television, is claiming that they did land there, but no evidence of that.
And what more are you hearing about the way these missiles were intercepted?
Well, again, this has come from US officials. We know that the Qataris have basically US air defense systems, and of course the US base at Al Udeid has them as well.
And are other assets in the region as protected as this airbase is, or are they more vulnerable?
Well, this is an extraordinarily protected air base because this is the nerve center, as we've been.
Yeah, the base in Qatar is a U.S. CENTCOM. Like, that is where their operations are being conducted. So it's very different from, like, the one in Iraq. The base in Iraq, you can just lob missiles at. You'll blow up a couple buildings. They probably will move. I think they did in 2020 when Iran said ahead of time that they were going to hit the bases in Iraq. They moved their troops away. They moved a lot of the equipment away so that they wouldn't get hit. It's symbolic. Trump has literally done this with Syrian bases in the past as well. Do you think Qatar will respond? No, they will not. What? If anything, when Israel struck the joint collaborative natural gas fields that Iran and Qatar have together, that was something worthy of significant retaliation to Israel, not to Iran. No, they're not going to. I don't think they're going to respond to Iran. This is not about Qatar anyway. This is about America. The real question is, will America respond? But as I said, judging by what Iran has done thus far, both in 2020 and also in the tit for tat back and forth, Operation True Promise 1, Operation True Promise 2, and now even Operation True Promise 3 between Iran and Israel, I said that their response was going to be an off-ramp, and it seems to be the case. Now, will America take this as an opportunity to actually back off from Iran? Will they? I don't think so, because I think that America has completely given the command structure to Israel at this point. You have the horniest, most violent generals possible in Trump's ear, and also on top of that, you got constant phone calls coming in from Israel that actually sully whatever kind of negotiation process that Trump might have actually been working on.